Okay, good morning, guys. We'll start. Right, so we were looking at metallurgy, and we have to start with metallurgy. So let us start with it. Okay. Right. So we are going to study how are we going to extract metals from Earth's crust. We know that we do mining and stuff, isn't it? Right. So we have different mines for different elements, right? So we are going to look at the broad picture of how these elements are extracted from the Earth's crust, and we are not going to speak about non-metals, right? We are going to speak about metals, and that's why it's called metallurgy. We are going to extract metals from the Earth's crust. Okay, right. So before we move on to see what are all the processes, how and all we are going to do it, we have to know two things. One is what is this term ore, and the other one is this term mineral. Okay, right. So if you ask me what is the basic difference between these two, right? So mineral is something which has some deposit of the element, some deposit of metal, right? So even if it is going to be a trace quantities, like it doesn't matter whether I'm able to extract it or not, right? But if some place has some deposit of element, deposit of a metal, that particular place is what is called as a mineral, right? Now from the mineral, right, if you are able to extract the metal efficiently, like efficiently in terms of cost, in terms of energy, in terms of time, right? If you're able to extract it efficiently, then that particular mineral is what is called as an ore, right? So basically, ore is a mineral, right? All ores are minerals, but not all minerals are ores, right? Hope you understand my statement. All ores are minerals because all ores are going to have deposit of some element, right? But from an ore, I'll be able to extract it efficiently, right? So that is the difference between your ore and mineral. Okay. Now, next thing what you have to know is what are the different names of ores for different elements, different M's, right? Say you have to know certain things, right? I'll give you this thing. So if you have say there's something, so starting with sodium, we will go element by element. So if I have sodium, sodium has something called as strona. Strona is Na2CO3 dot NaHCO3 dot 2H2O, right? Any other important thing? Yeah, washing soda, right? Washing soda is Na2CO3 dot 10H2O. Other important thing would be cryolite. So cryolite is Na3AlF6. So that is cryolite. So you have to know the names as well as the formulas. Sometimes questions can come from this. The other important one is borax. Now we know what is the formula for borax. So it is Na2B4O7 dot 10H2O. Right. So these are all the things which you have to remember for sodium. Right. At least these three. Trona you leave, but washing soda, cryolite, and borax are pretty important. Okay, so that is with respect to sodium. Where is my duster? Okay, it's here, right? So that's about sodium, the names of the ores. And then say if I go for potassium, the first one I have is carnallite, very important. So carnallite is a double salt. Carnallite is, I think you know the formula, KCl dot MgCl to 2H2O, 6H2O. Okay, and then you have Yeah, I think that would be fine. Right, that alone is sufficient for you. Okay, and when I go for Mg, now Mg, I have some important ones. I have Epsom salt. So Epsom salt is MgSO4 dot 7H2O, and you have carnallite again. Carnallite, you see, we have both potassium and magnesium. So again, that comes here. And then you have magnesite. Magnesite is MgCO3. And you have dolomite. Dolomite is again a double salt. And then you have, yeah, I think these would be sufficient for magnesium. These are the important ones. Okay, fine. Next, that's about sodium, potassium, magnesium. Then we'll move on to calcium. So calcium, I have gypsum. We already studied gypsum, CaSO4 dot 2H2O. And then you have limestone. Limestone is CaCO3. And then you have fluorspar, again an important thing. Fluorspar is CaF2, calcium fluoride. Anything else? Yeah. So these are all the things which you have to, again, dolomite also can come here. Dolomite contains both MgCO3 and CaCO. Okay, right? Fine. Next, aluminium. Aluminium, we know one important thing, that is bauxite. Bauxite is Al2O3 dot some hex H2O.
Sir, sorry, but what's the last one for calcium, sir?
Fluorspar, Flouspar. No, Flouor. Wait, I'll write it again. Flouorspar, fluorspar. Okay. And then again, cryolite can come here. Cryolite we saw in sodium, Na3Al(F6). Right? So anything else important? Yeah, mica. You know, you would have known mica sheets, right? So mica is a like this, K2O dot 3Al2O3 dot 6 SiO2 dot 2H2O. Okay, right? So these are all the important things for aluminium. Okay, then I have for tin. Tin is Sn, right? You have only one thing here. So I have something called as cassiterite. Cassiterite is SnO2. Okay, right? And when I go for lead, we have one important thing, galena. Galena is PbS, right? Anything important? No, right? And then if I go for copper, right? Copper, I have something called as copper pyrites. Copper pyrites is CuFeS2. Then I have copper glance. So copper glance would be Cu2S. Anything else? Cuprite. Normal cuprite. Cuprite is Cu2O. Right? This is also called as Ruby's copper. Right? And yeah, so these are all the things you have to know for copper. Anything else is missing? We have actually. Right. Okay, the next important one would be iron. Iron would be hematite. Hematite is Fe2O3. Magnetite. Magnetite is Fe3O4. This is a mixed oxide, we know, right? And I have iron pyrites. Iron pyrite is FeS2. Okay, right? And there is just one more. One more is for mercury, and we'll wind. And this is it, right? So mercury, one important one is cinnabar. That is HGS, if I'm not right. Is it HGS? Where is, yeah, HGS. Okay, so these are there are so many stuff. There are so many minerals, so many these things. The entire branch of science is belong to this geology, right? So anyways, like there are so many, but these are all the important things which you have to know, right? So I have seen directly questions coming from this. Which of the following are the ores of mercury? So they have given bauxite, cinnabar, of all those four options. You have to choose cinnabar. I have seen questions coming like that, right? Okay, so that is the different types of ores and their names and their formulas, right? So now we'll move on to the process, right? Now we have enough background information for us to look at the processes, right? Okay, so done. I'll drop this part. Okay, so any right, so for any ore, if I have an ore, right, now that ore has to be crushed, or I have a process called as pulverization. Pulverization is actually crushing. Okay, now after I crush this, I'll be getting the crushed ore, right? Now this crushed ore has to undergo a process called as concentration of the ore, or it is also called as dressing of the ore, and you will get the concentrated ore, and this concentrated ore has to be oxidized, right? Again, oxidation can either be of two forms. You have something called as calcination, or you have something called as roasting, right? So now you have the oxidized ore, and this oxidized ore has to be reduced. So now you have the reduced ore. Reduced ore is basically the metal, only the metal, right? And the last process is refining, right? Now you have the refined pure ore. Okay, now you see you have the ore. Now that is crushed. It is made into smaller particles with the help of crushing or pulverization, right? The next step, what I'll tell you, what are these processes? Don't worry, we're just starting it. So this is the overall map, right? So after the crushing, you have the crushed ore, then you have to go for concentration or dressing, right? So then you have the concentrated ore. This concentrated ore, you will have some volatile impurities, right? So if you strongly heat it, that is what is oxidation. Strongly heat it, you are going to get the oxidized ore with some lesser impurities, right? Now this oxidized ore, the metal will be in the form of its oxide generally, or some other way, depending on what, whether it's calcination or roasting, it will be different. So now you have the metal with some anion. Now if you reduce that ore, you are going to get the metal, that is the reduced ore, only the metal, but again that is impure. Now the last step would be refining, and you will be ending up the end product. Okay, so what are the important steps? This is not that important. After that, concentration or dressing, oxidation, reduction, and refining, all these are the important points. Concentration 1, oxidation 2, reduction 3, refining 4. 4 main steps. Okay, now depending, there are so various different types of concentration, different types of oxidation, reduction, refining, all these things are there. Now that is going to depend on what kind of metal you are going to use. Okay, so we'll see one by one what and all are the various ways by which we can do this. Okay, so this is the overall flow chart. Right, if you have taken this down, I can run this part. How many of you are there? Okay, right. So for like crushing or pulverization is very easy. You have a machine. You basically you will get it in the form of a rock, isn't it? Basically, the mining process you'll get in the form of a rock, right? Now that has to be crushed, right, and made into a powder. That's the first step. That is the crushing and pulverization is over. So we'll go to the second step directly. That is your concentration or dressing of the ore. So what do you mean by concentration is, I would say in layman terms, it is just that it is removal of big impurities, right? Removal of big impurities in the sense which you're able to see with your naked eyes, right? For example, some sand might be there, some other rock might be there, some leaves might be there, some magnetic material might be there. If you just take the sand, if you just do the if you just run a magnet over it, you'll be getting the black particles attached to the magnet. That is basically silicon dioxide, right? So those things can be there. So basically concentration means removal of big impurities. Okay, now there are various ways of doing it. So one is, what is my famous hand picking? I think from the name itself we can understand. I have to remove the big things with the hands, say stones or leaves or whatever it is. That is a very normal method, hand picking. Right. Next one is what is called as your gravity separation. Right. Now gravity separation is also called as hydraulic washing. Right. So here what happens, let me tell you. Right. So in gravity separation, what happens is, right, so you have a bed, right? In this bed, I'll have the ore and the impurities. Okay. Now you allow water to flow through this at a very fast rate, right? Very high flow rate, right? The water has. So what it's going to do is, obviously you have the ore particles and you have the impurities, right? Now those impurities will generally be what to say, little lesser in weight compared to the ore particles. Okay. Now what is going to happen? You are going to get all the big impurities out because the water is going to flow. Okay. Now please understand, for each and every types of process, not only this, whatever we are going to see, you have to understand what is the underlying principle behind it, basic principle behind it, right? So here the basic principle, from the name itself I can tell it is gravity separation. So it is based on difference between the ore and the impurities. Obviously ore particles are heavier, impurities are little less weight, so when the water is flown, they are washed away, right? That is what is called as your hydraulic washing or gravity separation. Okay, right. Second one, or the third one, is what is called as your magnetic separation. Right, I think from the name itself you can understand what I'm going to do, right? So in magnetic separation, what happens, let me see. Okay, so in magnetic separation, again you have your bed, right? Now you have a magnet, right? Now this is the ore plus the impurities here, right? So when you move the magnet from this side to this side, right, all the unwanted magnetic impurities will be attracted to the magnet, and in the ore you have only the ore particles. Hope you understand what I'm trying to say. Or it can be the other way also. Say for example, if you're doing it for an iron ore, right, obviously iron particles will be more attracted towards the magnet, so they will come and the impurities will stay down, right? So either way, what you have to understand is in magnetic separation, the basic principle is difference in magnetic properties between the ore and the impurity. Okay, between the ore and the impurity. Basically, either impurity can get added to the magnet, or say ore can get added towards the magnet. Right? So either way, this is going to work. This is just a very initial step. Obviously, not all impurities are removed. Some big impurities can be removed with this. Don't ask me, sir, what if both the things are magnetically active? Then I'll not use this method. As simple as that. Okay, right? Fine. So that's about magnetic separation. And then You have froth flotation, if I'm not right. Yes, froth flotation. Sorry guys, there was a call. Okay, so the next one is froth. I think this is fourth one. Froth flotation method. Okay, right. So we'll see how the experimental setup is. Okay, so if you see, there will be a vessel, right? So to this vessel, I will attach a stirrer. This can stir. Okay, now you will put the ore plus. Okay, actually, I forgot to introduce one thing. The impurities has a technical name, right? So that technical name we generally use it as gangue, Gangue. Okay, gangue means impurities. Okay, that's just a technical term for the impurities. Okay, so when I say gangue from now on, it represents impurities. That's what you need to understand. Okay, so here you will put the ore. Obviously, it will have the impurities along with it, the gangue particles along with it. Okay, now to this you will add oil, you will add water. Okay, right, you will add oil as well as water. Okay, and you will also add sometimes something called as, okay, I'll write it like this, you will add something called as depressants. I'll tell you what are these, right? And then anything else you'll use? Okay, so this oil and water or what are called as frothers, and you have one more thing called as collectors. Okay, so these are the things which I add. Okay, right? So frothers, froth basically means foam. Okay, when I say froth means foam. Okay, right? So I'll add oil and water. Those are what are called as frothers, right? Now you will add the ore plus gangue, obviously ore which contains the gangue particles. I'll come back to depressants later. You don't add depressants every time. Okay, I'll tell you when you add depressants. Collectors you add every time. Okay, fine. So what is going to happen here is, okay, if I tell you what is the basic principle behind it, then it will make more sense. Okay, now the basic principle is difference in wettability, right? The basic principle is going to be difference in wettability. What do you mean by wettability? The ability to get wet by a particular liquid, right? Say now you have ore particles, you have gangue particles. Now the ore particles will generally be wet by oil. Okay. Okay, the ore particles will generally be wet by oil, and the impurities will generally be wet by water. Hope you understand what I'm trying to say. Here the basic difference is difference in wettability, ability to get wet by a particular liquid. Okay. Now, ore particles will have different wettability, gangue particles will have different wettability, and that is what is mentioned here. The ore particles are going to wet by oil, right? And the gangue particles are going to get wet by water, right? Now, what is going to happen? This stirrer is going to move, it is going to stir, right? Now, you also do this experiment in your kitchens if possible. You add oil, you add water to the mixie, both of them, and try to mix it. What will you see is a huge amount of froth. Froth means foam. Okay, if you just open the mixer and you'll see there'll be a lot of foam bubbles coming out. Right now, that's exactly is going to happen here. Right now, if you see properly, right? So when these oil and water gets mixed, right, you form the froth, you form the foam, right? Now that foam or the top layer basically will contain only the oil, is it not? Because oil is less denser than water. Oil will float on water, isn't it? Oil floats on water. So what I'm going to do when I'm going to stir the oil is wet, I mean the ore is wet by the oil and the impurities are wet by water. So you will have two layers in the froth. I mean two layers in the vessel. One is what is your oil layer, right? Oil layer which will contain the ore particles, and down the sediments or say whatever is there in the lower layer, which will be impurities with the water. Now what you can do, you can just take the top layer alone, skim it off, right? So that will give you the concentrated ore. That will give you the concentrated ore, right? So you can understand why these are called as frothers, because these mixtures are going to give me the froth. Oil and water is going to give me the froth, right? This collectors, okay, example can be xanthates. You don't have to know much about it. Xanthates are some chemicals, organic compounds, right? Now, which will make sure that the froth comes to the top. Basically, it collects the froth. Okay, collectors collects the froth, and from the collector, I'll be able to skim off the oil plus ore particles. Okay, right? So hope you understood the entire picture. Now I have the stirrer, it rotates, froth is formed, top layer oil and ore particles will be there, it can be skimmed off. As simple as that. Okay, now what are these depressants for? Okay, now please understand, these are generally used for sulfide ores, right? These are froth flotation process is generally used for sulfide ores. Okay, so if you take any sulfide ore, for example, if you take Jelena is PBS, lead ore, right? Now, if you take Jelena actually will not contain just PBS. It will also contain some impurity in the form of zinc sulfide. Okay, it will also contain some impurities in the form of zinc sulfide, right? And both are capable of getting wet by oil, right? Both the sulfates, PBS as well as ZNS, is capable of getting wet by oil. So both of them are capable of coming to the froth. That is, they can be skimmed off, right? But I don't want ZNS. I want only PBS, right? So in those cases, I go for something called as depressants, right? These depressants depresses the ability of a particular molecule to come to the froth. As simple as that. Depressants depresses the ability of a particular compound to come to the froth, right? So basically, this depressant is going to prevent ZNS to come to the froth. Okay, now how are we going to do it is the next question, right? So examples of depressants can be sodium cyanide. Okay, NaCN can be a good example for depressant, right? So what it will do is, right? So this NaCN will react with ZNS to form a coordination complex. You don't have to know the formula for this. Okay, this NaCN will react with ZNS to form a coordination complex. Okay, and this coordination complex is water soluble. Okay, this coordination complex is water soluble. So what will happen? The moment you add the depressant, ZNS reacts with the depressant NaCN to form the complex, and that will be wet by water because that is soluble in water, so that the ZNS does not come to the froth. Okay, right? So hope you understood the entire process. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Is there any doubt or everybody understood this? What happens in froth flotation?
So can you repeat the role of collectors?
So basically collectors, what happens is, see, when you have the froth getting formed, when you have a mixture of oil and water and you mix it, okay, so if you just keep it for some time, right, eventually a layer will be formed. If you just don't disturb it for a while, eventually a layer, an oil layer and a what is that, water layer will be formed. But if you want to make it faster, right, if you want to make the sedimentation process faster, if you want the froth to come to the top layer little more quickly, at those times you go for collectors. Collectors are going to collect the froth, as simple as that. Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay, collectors, simple this thing. See, there are eventually chemical reactions involved here, but for your level, you don't need to know all that. Okay, so collectors are helpful for collecting the froth and making the separation process little quicker. Those are the two roles played by collector. Okay, right. So that is about froth flotation, right? We saw magnetic separation, and yeah, we have next one coming. Okay, if you have taken this part, I can drop it off. Okay. So the next one, I think this is the fifth one, is a process called as liquefaction. Okay, now this is a very simple process, right? So here the basic principle is difference in melting point between your ore and the gangue particles. Okay, right. So here what happens is, generally what happens is the melting point of ore is lesser than the melting point of gangue particles generally. Again, there can be exceptions for sure, right? Or it can even be opposite, doesn't matter, right? So generally what happens is melting point of ore is lesser than the melting point of gangue particles. Okay, so what happens is I have the bed in which I have the ore plus the gangue, and I strongly heat it. I strongly heat it to an extent where, for obviously, if the melting point of the ore particles are lesser, what happens once I reach the melting point of the ore, right? The ore particles will start melting. So the ore particles will start melting, and that can be collected here. Okay. So once the ore particles start melting, you switch off the power supply. I mean, power supply means you stop heating it. Okay. So now, and obviously all the ore particles would have gotten melted, and they can be collected in a vessel, like this. As simple as that. Okay. So liquefaction, from the name you can tell it is going to be something related to liquid form. So how do I do it? Solid to liquid, I go for melting by going for the melting point. Here the difference is difference in the melting point between the ore and the gangue particles. Okay, when you heat, first the metal melts, the ore melts, the gangue stays. As simple as that. Okay, so that is about what is that? Liquefaction. Next one is an important one, is what is called as leaching. Right? So this leaching is also called as hydrometallurgy. Okay, leaching is also called as hydrometallurgy. Right. So what happens here is, in leaching, generally we go for leaching. A very famous example of alumina or bauxite. Right, I go for leaching process if I'm going to have any aluminum ores. Okay, right. So here, what is the basic principle is difference in, I can say, either solubility or reactivity, chemical reactivity. Okay, so here the basic principle is difference in solubility or reactivity between the ore and the gangue particles. Okay, so we'll see what happens here. Right. So obviously, if I talk about solubility, say if I take a particular solvent, and if I'm going to if I try to dissolve the ore and the gangue particles, say the ore particles will dissolve, the gangue particles will not dissolve, right? So then I'll be able to separate, isn't it? Right. So like we'll see in the form of examples. For example, if you have alumina, Al2O3.2H2O, this is an impure alumina, right? Now, if I use NaOH as a solvent, if I use NaOH as a solvent, what is going to happen is these two are going to react. Okay. Now these two are going to react. So you'll form Na2AlO3. Am I right? NaAlO3 or Na2? NaOAlO3. This is what is called as sodium aluminate. Right? Sodium aluminate plus 3H2O. Okay, fine. So what you see here is, right, so Al2O3 plus H2O contains ore as well as the gangue particles. Out of this mixture, only the ore particles will react with NaOH, which will form this particular compound, sodium aluminate. What happens to the impurities? Impurities will not dissolve, impurities will not react, right? And they will form a sediment, and that can be filtered out. Okay, so after you complete the reaction, right, you take a filter paper, you do the filtration, so you will get all the other impurities in the filter paper itself, and in the mother liquor, you know what is the mother liquor? The filtrate, basically the time which you collected, right? So that will be containing only the ore particles. Okay, now the next question is, sir, how am I going to get back Al2O3? Because now you have found the compound. I don't want this. I want only Al2O3. That's what I started with. So for that, it's pretty simple, right? So this sodium aluminate, right? Sodium aluminate NaAlO2, O3, O2 or O3? It's O2, so O2 guys, I'm sorry. This is NaAlO2. Okay, right. So NaAlO2, sodium aluminate. If I add H2O and I heat it, you are eventually going to get A. Okay, you are going to get Al2O3 back with NaOH and H2O. Okay, right? So obviously this only will the ore particles will only form this particular compound, and this compound can be retrieved back to Al2O3, and this in this case is going to be pure. Now you see you started with the impure one, you ended up with a pure one. Not exactly pure, but yeah, comparatively pure. Okay, so that is what is called as your leaching. Okay, right. There is one more way of doing it. Now, what you're doing it is for aluminium. If it's aluminium, we generally call it as hydrometallurgy, or basically this particular, whatever the process you have, is what is called as Bayer's process, right? Bayer's process for alumina, where you use NaOH, form the complex or form the compound, you retrieve back the ore, which is pure. Okay, same under leaching, I can do this for different elements like Ag, that is silver and gold also. Okay, we'll see how are you going to do it. Right, so the say under leaching only we are seeing. So this is Bayer's process. The next one is what is called as McArthur process. Okay, McArthur process is for gold and silver. Okay, now it's pretty easy. Same thing what you have. Say if I have Ag, Ag reacts with NaCN. Ag is again impure. Right. So one thing about silver and gold ores is you will not see them in combined forms. In the sense that if you take aluminum, you see Al2O3, zinc means zinc sulfide, lead means lead sulfide. So like that, you will see always an anion present in other kind of metals. But since your silver and gold are not that reactive, okay, you will eventually see them only in elemental form, along with impurities, obviously. Right? Ag will be as Ag only. No other compound will be found because it is very unreactive. Okay, right. So Ag, now this is the solvent which I'm using, sodium cyanide. Again, this is going to react. And only the ore particles will react, the gangue particles will not react. Same mechanism only. So you had H2O and you had O2. You will form Na, Ag, Cn twice. Right? Na, AgCN twice plus 4N for NaOH plus NaOH, and this particular compound, it's called sodium silver cyanide. No, sodium argentocyanide. Silver cyanide we should not tell. Right, it's called sodium argentocyanide. Again, this complex will be formed only by the ore particles. Gangue particles will not react. They will be again sedimented. Okay, right. Now, obviously, I have to get it back. I have to get back the Au. Right. So again, this can be either Ag or Au. Both the things we use the same process. Okay. So again, this can be Ag or Au. Now, instead of Argento, you go for Oro. Right. You know, Au. What is the full form? Argentum. What is Au?
Aurum,
full
sir.
form? Aurum only. Okay. So it should be orocyanide. Okay. Right. So, and how do you get it back? How do you get back the pure Ag or Au? Now you take this, you react it with zinc. Now, obviously, zinc is going to be more reactive than Ag. So it is going to replace Ag with the complex, right? So what will you have is Na, Zn, Cn twice plus Ag or Au, which will be pure. Okay, again, same process, leaching, but different solvents, different names. For aluminium, it's called Bayer's process, and for Ag or Au, it's called McArthur process. McDonald's, you remember? I don't know how many of you may love McDonald's. I love McDonald's. Do you love McDonald's? Anybody likes?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good. So I like the McDonald's. If you go into Indian these things, no. So they have started this new thing, not a new, comparatively new. So they have this peri peri mix, right? So that you will never see in any other country. This is especially for
Yes,
that's a
sir.
very nice, right? That's a tasty one with French fries. Anyways, so I think most of you are from that area, Velachery, right? McDonald's is there near the Grand Mall, right? I have been there a lot of times. Okay, fine. So yes, just people. That is about your concentration processes. Subway, yeah, Subway also I like, but Subway will be little healthy, right? I like it, but my family doesn't like it. They say that I can even just cut vegetables and put it in the bread and give it to you, except that for the sauce, sauce will be a little different. Anyways, even I like Subway. Yeah, Subway is good, but not as much as McDonald's. Okay, fine, cool. So we'll move on. Okay, so that's about the, what is the time, guys? We have 45 minutes. Okay, fine. 11:30 we start. Okay. So that's about the concentration processes. Next, we'll go for oxidation. Or I don't want to call it as oxidation. Let me just call it as heating. Okay, right. So again, heating can be of two types. Okay, so heating can be of two types, as we already mentioned. One is what is called as calcination. The other one is what is called as roasting. Okay, so if you look at the basic differences here, right? So here in calcination, I heat in the absence of air, or basically I say oxygen. Okay, right? I heat in the absence of air, in a closed furnace, in a closed system. I start heating it. There is no air supply, there is no oxygen supply. While I'm just burning it, the better. Can I say burning? Yeah, burning without oxygen. If I say combustion, combustion is burning with oxygen. Okay, so here I'm just going to burn it, heat the particular concentrated ore. Obviously, you understand, we have completed one step, we are in the second step, right? So depending on whatever the metal you use, you go for a suitable concentration method, and then you go for suitably either calcination or roasting. I'll tell you how to do it anyways, right? So here it's going to be heating in the absence of air, and obviously roasting is going to be opposite. It is going to be heating in the presence of air. Air or oxygen. Okay, right. So we'll see how are we going to do here. Right. Say, generally in calcination, what happens is, right, you generally do it for carbonate ores, and even sometimes for sulfates ores, right? Or anything else, carbonate ore, sulfate. Sulfate, there is no ore actually present, but if at all you have sulfate, you can use it. Or if you have any water of crystallization, if you want to remove any water of crystallization, right, at that time you don't need any oxygen, you just have to heat it, the water will evaporate, isn't it? Right. So for these kind of ores, I generally go for calcination. Okay, say for example, I have Al2O3 dot say 3H2O. Now if I just heat it, I'm not using any oxygen. See, there is only one reactant is that there's no oxygen. So you will form say Al2O3 plus 3H2. Okay, right? Same goes can go for Fe2O3 or 2H2O will form Fe2O3 dot 2H2O, whatever it is, just removing the water crystallization. Right. Now, say if I take carbonates, for example, say if I have zinc carbonate, when I heat it, you are going to form ZNO plus CO2 is evolved. So basically, the entire motive of heating is I want to convert the ore into its oxidized form. Right, I want to convert the ore into its oxidized form, in the sense that I want to have more number of oxygen atoms. Okay, right. So when you have zinc carbonate, when you heat it, you are going to form zinc oxide, and carbon dioxide is liberated. Say the same can goes with CaCO3, isn't it? CaCO3 on heating will form CaO plus CO2. Right. Yeah. So these are the things. Right. So what happens here is, why are we doing it? Okay, one thing is we are converting into the oxidized form. The other thing is both calcination as well as roasting remove volatile impurities. We know what are volatile impurities. When you just, volatile means easily going to the vapor state, isn't it? So when you heat it, all these volatile impurities will go to the vapor phase. So in the solid state, only your oxidized ore will be present. Okay, so two reasons why you go for heating. One is for removing the volatile impurities and to convert the ore into its oxidized form or reducible form. Basically, only if I have the oxidized form, I can go for reduction. So either it's called oxidized form, or you can also call it as reducible form. Reducible form means a form in which I can reduce the product, reduce the reactant, something like that. Okay, so that is about calcination. We'll see what happens in roasting. Now, roasting, obviously, you have to use heat. You have to heat the compound in the presence of oxygen, right? So this is like a direct combination method of whatever the element you have or whatever the compound you have. You add oxygen and you form the oxide. As simple as that. Okay, so that's about calcination. Let me rub the bottom part alone. If you have taken it down. Right. So when I talk about roasting, right, say examples can be like this. Say I have sulfur with O2 form sulfur SO2 or any other metal. Any metal plus O2 will form MXOY, the oxidized form. Sorry. The other way is by, if at all I have zinc sulfide, if you use oxygen, you are going to form ZNO plus SO2. Yeah. Again, you see, I use, obviously in all the cases I have to heat it. Okay. So you have zinc sulfide, right? If you have sulfides, those can be converted to oxides. Same goes with your Cu2s. Cu2s plus O2 will form Cu2O plus SO2. Right? Same goes with Fe. Or if you have copper pyrides, I know what is the formula. CuFeS2. Is it correct? Yeah, CuFeS2 with O2 will form Cu2O plus FeO plus SO2. Am I right? Yeah. What? FeS. Oh, okay. So first would be first conversion to Cu2s and FeS. Again, this will again be heated to form Cu2O and FeO. Okay, so if you use copper pyrite, CuFeS2, right? First step would be converting this into copper sulfide and iron sulfide. And the next step would be to convert them into, basically you can even directly write Cu2 and FeO. It doesn't matter, but still it is better to give some information like this. Okay, first step would be to convert to sulfide and then to the oxide.
For that also SO2 will be byproduct, sir.
Yes. SO2 will be the byproduct. Yes, okay. Definitely. Right. Okay. Okay, now there can be some side products as well. If you have, when you have zinc sulfate, zinc or lead sulfate, not lead sulfate, lead sulfide. Now, obviously, one of the product you form is going to be ZNO or PbO, whatever it is. But the other side product is also possible. If I react with oxygen, I can have PbSO4 or zinc sulfate also to be formed. Okay. Now, this zinc sulfate or lead sulfate has to be there in the, again, copper sulfate can also get formed, right? So these kind of side products, you cannot do anything about it, right? You have to maybe go for maybe again calcination of these compounds. The calcination of these compounds will again give me the oxide back. So something can be done. So it is not only these kind of products you'll be getting, you'll also get some side products like this, sulfates, if you go for sulfidos. Okay. So that is about oxidation. In this, I have one more actually. Wait. Actually, now itself I can teach you. Okay. Right. So in this, there's a small thing which you have to know. So there is a process called as smelting. Okay. Now smelting is very similar to liquefaction, right? But what will you do is, it's very simple. It is the process of extracting the metal in fused state. That's what is known as smelting. Okay. So obviously what will happen is, when you are going to heat, obviously you are going to heat all these compounds. So you need a furnace. Okay. Now that furnace obviously will be going for very high temperatures. Okay. So like, I don't know whether you have seen in Discovery channels or somewhere, you would have seen iron, right? Once they extract it there, it will be in the form of a red color molten state. You should have seen it, right? So that actually comes from the surface. Not surface means, sorry, furnace. Okay. So that process of extracting the metal in fused state or in molten state is what is called as smelting. Okay. So basically, when you're going to do this, when you're going to do the oxidation, eventually it's a process which will happen simultaneously. Smelting will happen simultaneously. Is it not? Because when you heat it, the metal will melt. I mean, the oxide or whatever will melt, and you will be able to extract them afterwards. Okay. So that is what is called as what is that? Smelting. Okay. Now I want to make sure one more thing also. We talk about furnaces. We'll talk more about furnace, reverberatory furnace, and we'll speak about it. Right. So in the furnace, right? If this is the furnace, right? So you will add the ore plus gang. Right. Now ore is okay. Like all the if the things are volatile impurities, okay, they will go into the vapor state, the gang particles. But what if they are not? What if they are not volatile? Right. So at that time, what you have to use is something called as a flux. Okay. Now this flux, what is it going to do? Is this flux will react with the gang particles. Okay, this flux will react with the gang particles to form something called as slag, which is actually sedimented, right? Which can be easily removed, is what you have to understand. Okay, so what is the role of flux? Flux is generally used in furnaces. Okay, right. So the flux is going to react with the gang particles, and they're going to react to form something called as slag, right? Now this slag can be easily removed because they're going to get sedimented. Okay, right. Now, depending on what kind of gang particles you have, right, you have two types of flux. One is what is called as acidic flux. The other one is what is called as your basic flux. Okay, acidic flux and basic flux. Now, it depends on what kind of impurity you have. For example, if you have a basic gang, you go for an acidic flux. If you have an acidic gang, you go for a basic flux. Okay, say if I have to give you examples, right? Say you understand here. Say for example, SiO2 plus CaO. Now CaO is what is my gang particle, right? And I know it is basic in nature, isn't it? Now you see SiO2 will be an acidic oxide. This is my acidic flux. Now what will it form? It is going to form CaSiO3, which is going to be a slag molecule. Okay. So if at all I have to give you another example, say in this case, SiO2 can also be an impurity. In this case, it is an acidic gang. Right, now you have to use a basic flux. Now basic flux can be CaCO3. I know this is basic in nature. This is basic flux. Okay, so again, what will you form? CaSiO3, is it right? Yeah, CaSiO3 plus one more thing will be carbon dioxide will be evolved. And this is my slag. Again, that can be easily removed. Okay, right. So we could have spoken this when we went to furnace, but again, you can look into it, not a big deal, right? Okay, now next thing, so that's about the oxidation part. Okay, so oxidation, either calcination or roasting, and smelting, you have to know what is a flux, basic flux, acidic flux, and slag. Right. Okay, now next thing, the next step is reduction step, isn't it? Now you would have got the oxidized form or the reducible form of the ore. Now you have to obviously convert the ore to the metal form. You don't want any anion present, you want the crude metal. to be present. Crude means impure metal, obviously, and after that I have to go for refining, right? Okay, so reduction. Okay, now I have different types of reduction. Okay, say I can go for any reducing agent, right? Or I can go for okay, let me tell you what are all the possibilities. Okay, all right. So under reduction, first one is using carbon or carbon monoxide as a reducing agent. Okay, using carbon or carbon monoxide as the reducing agent. Now I think it's very simple. You can understand this. For example, if I have ZnO, if I use carbon as the reducing agent, you will form zinc and carbon monoxide. Same thing can be done for either so many other elements like that. Say NiO, Fe2O3, Cr2O3, all reacting with coke. We call it as coke, right? Coke is carbon, right? So that will form the metal and the carbon monoxide, right? Now this is for carbon, right? If I use CO, now the only difference, everything is going to be same, but instead of CO, you are going to form CO2 as the byproduct. That is the only difference. Say for example, if you have say PbO reacting with CO to form Pb plus CO2, gas will be avoided. Okay, CO2 gas will be avoided. So that is the first type of reduction you can use, either using carbon or carbon monoxide. Both will give the same product, but except that if you use carbon, carbon monoxide will be side product, and if you use carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide will be the the side product. Okay, right. Next one, that is about carbon or coke. Carbon or carbon monoxide. The other one is by using, okay, second way is by using a highly electropositive metal. I think this makes sense, isn't it? Right? So if I just give you the reaction, you'll be able to understand. Right? Say for example, if you have TiCl4, titanium chloride, right? Now titanium chloride will react with sodium to form NaCl plus titanium will be avoided. Isn't it? Right? Now you see what is going to happen. Obviously, any kind of metal oxide or metal, anything you have, right? So you make it react with a highly electropositive element, which is more reactive than the element here or the metal here. You will be forming the salt or whatever the compound, and you will be getting the required metal outside.
So it's almost like a displacement reaction.
It's almost like it is a displacement reaction.
Okay, fine.
Okay, so this is obviously a displacement reaction. Okay, next. Third way is by using H2, or you can even go for water gas. What is water gas, guys? What is water gas? Okay, so water gas is basically a mixture of CO and H2. Okay, right? You're going to get CO and it's going to be a mixture of CO and H2. This water gas is also called as syn gas. Okay, synthesis gas. Okay, fine. So how are you going to use it? Basically, the hydrogen is there. Hydrogen is going to act as the reducing agent. That's what you need to understand. Very simple, right? Say for example, if you have CO and if I react with it H2, right? Say you will form Cu plus H2O, right? So any other oxide like this, say one example for your carbon water gas would be say NiO plus CO plus H2 is going to form Ni plus CO2 plus H2. Again, you see Ni is gone back, right? Right, remember, on all these cases, the water will be in the form of vapor. So it is not going to be in the reaction mixture. It is going to evaporate. Okay, so by like this, you can use either your H2 or water gas for as your reducing agent. Okay, right. Next, under reduction only, right? It's called self or auto reduction. Right. So what I mean by this is you don't have to use any extra reducing agent here. Okay, you don't have to use any extra reducing agent here. Say for example, what will happen is if I go for your first step, that is oxidation. Before this step, I had oxidation, isn't it? Right. Say when I went for oxidation, HGS, for example, if you have HGS reacts with O2 to form HGO. Correct, plus SO2. Right. Now, this you oxidized, but what you have to understand is even though some amount of HGS is converted to HGO, not all of it are converted. Isn't that? Say some amount of HGS is still left. Right. So what is going to happen is the unreacted HGS will react with the formed HGO like this. HGS plus HGO is going to form Hg plus SO2. This reaction also might happen. This is exactly what is my self or auto reduction. Right. So you formed during the oxidation process, you formed the oxide, and that is going to react with the unreacted sulfide to form the metal and SO2 gas. Okay. Now this is possible even in case of copper and lead. Maybe I'll give you the reactions also. Right. Say same reaction. If you had Cu2s reacting with O2 to form Cu2O plus SO2, again this and this can react to form Cu plus SO2. You see, again, this process is what is my self-reduction. I don't need any extra reducing agent here. Right? Same thing can happen with lead sulfide. PbS plus O2 will give PbO plus SO2. Again, PbS plus PbO will form Pb plus SO2. Okay, so that is for what is that? Self-reduction or auto-reduction. Okay, next one, the last type of reduction is, any guesses? What can be the last type of reduction? Any guesses? Like we have studied that. I mean, I didn't teach you, but still, in school they should have taught you. Not metallurgy, but in some other chapter. Anything clicks? Electrolytic reduction. Right, isn't it? I can use electricity to make this reaction happen. Right. Say you are going to have any kind of metal, like say A plus with B minus. A plus and A can be metal, A is the metal, and B is any anion for that matter. Right. So you know what is going to happen. I have the solution of AB. Now you will have the cathode, you will have the anode. Right now, when you pass electricity, what will happen? Now I have the A plus ion, B minus ion, the positively charged ion will move towards the negative electrode, that is cathode. Right. So at cathode, what is going to happen? At cathode, your A plus or A, let me write it as AN plus because I don't want to generalize it. So AN plus will accept N electrons to form A. Right now, this is the reduced form, is it not? Now you have the only the metal here. Very simple. Okay, now you can even go for electrolytic reduction. Right. Okay. Now the last step, that is about the reduction part. Okay. Now we just have to look at the last part, that is refining. What is the time? Okay, we have 20 more minutes. Right. So I hope everything is understood. So the last part is refining. Okay, basically now you have got the crude metal from the reduced form, like you have reduced the metal oxide or whatever you had, you have reduced it to the metal, but again that metal is not 100% pure, right? You have to go for refining it so that you will
Sir,
get
for
some
electrolyte reduction, it's mostly bivalent metal, sir.
not necessarily. I can even do it. Say, for example, if you want to extract sodium from seawater, what will you do? You will put the NaCl solution here. Sodium can also get deposited.
Okay, sir.
It is not generally that it is. It can be any cation for that matter. It is not generally that it is going to be dye positive or mono positive. Not necessary. Okay, right. Fine. So we'll go for refining now. Right. So in refining, we have so many methods. We'll just look into the important ones. Okay, fine. So the first one, and I think we have already seen this, is liquation. We already saw this, right? Liquation is basically heating the element to its melting point. So you can do it at the first, at the first concentration process, you saw that it is going to be in the form of a ore. The only difference here is that I'm going to have a metal alone, right? So the metal alone will be melted, all the impurities will stay behind. Same thing, difference in melting point. Same thing, what you have seen that in the case of concentration. Again, it can be done here. Okay, next. If you have liquid solutions, you can go for distillation. We know what is the basic principle. Can you tell me what is the basic principle? Basic principle behind that distillation is what?
Difference in boiling point.
Absolutely right. So you have difference in boiling point. So obviously now you have two liquids. Basically, two liquids means the ore and the gangue both are metal and the gangue both are in liquid form in some way, right? Then you go for distillation. Say the one with a lower boiling point will evaporate first, and that can be condensed, and you can get it back, right? So that's about distillation. Right. Say I think you have. Okay. Right. So the next one is thermal decomposition. Okay. So in thermal decomposition, what can happen is, so these are used for removing volatile impurities again, right? So what can happen is this is almost like leaching, right? But you are not going to form any solution here. So we'll see how it happens. So you have something under this. I have two things. I have something called as Mons process for nickel. Okay. So here what happens is, or I would say the basic difference is, a basic principle is difference in volatility. Right? Difference in volatility. Okay. Right. Say if you have impure nickel. Now, if you make it react with carbon monoxide at some 60 to 80 degrees Celsius, right? Now, what will happen is it is going to form actually a volatile compound. Volatile compound of the form NiCO 4 times. Yeah, NiCO 4 times. This is a complex which is volatile, right? But the impurities are not capable of forming this, right? So this will be there. And if you just heat it to 180 degrees Celsius, you are going to get the nickel, which is pure. Okay, right? So you have the impure nickel, you make it react with carbon monoxide, it is going to form the compound. The gangue particles will not form the compound, and this is volatile. Right. Now, if you heat this to 180 degrees Celsius, you are going to get the pure nickel back, and obviously plus carbon monoxide. Whatever you added, you got it back. Right. Now, the same thing can be done for your zirconium. This is for nickel. You can do this for zirconium as well, but the name is different. The name is called Van Arkel process, and this is for zirconium, ZR. Okay. Now, very simple. So you have the impure zirconium. You react with I2, right? So you will form basically ZrI2, am I right? I4. Zirconium iodide, which will be in gaseous phase. Okay. Now this, okay, you have to go for 270 Kelvin. 270 Kelvin? 870 Kelvin, sorry. Right, you have to go for 870 Kelvin. And then to this, now again, this is impure. Now, if you go for the temperature of around 2070 Kelvin, you will be getting the zirconium and the iodine back. This will be pure. Okay, both processes are very simple, right? You add something, you form the covalent volatile compound, which is not going to be formed by the impurities, and you again heat it, you are going to get the pure metal back. Same goes with your Van der Kolk process for zirconium. Okay, right? Right. Now, next thing, there are only two more things, and after that, we have to go for reverberatory furnace. The reactions happening in that. Oh, we have Ellingham diagram. So, okay, we'll complete it. No issues. Okay. So the next one is what is called as, I don't know whichever the number is. So the next one is what is called as zone refining. Okay. Now, what is the basic principle here is the impurities are more soluble in the solid state of the metal than in the fused state of the metal. Okay, that is the basic underlying principle here. What I'm trying to say is, obviously, I'm going to heat it. That's what I'm going to do, right? So you have the solid metal, right? In the solid metal, some impurities will be there, right? So in the solid metal, these impurities are highly dissolved. Okay, now once I'm going to melt the metal, when I'm going to make it into the fused form, the solubility of the impurities in the fused state is less. That's what you mean by the statement. Impurities are more soluble in the solid state of the metal compared to when they're in the fused state of the metal. Okay, so that is what we are going to use here in zone refining. Very simple process. I have the metal bar along with the impurities. Okay, bear with my diagram. Okay, right now this I'm going to have a movable heater. Okay, I have the metal bar and I'm going to have a movable heater. This heater can move this side and that side. Okay, right. Now what are you going to do? So basically when you this is a very small heater, this is a very big rod, so only a very small portion of this bar can be heated efficiently, isn't it? Right. So what is going to happen when I'm going to heat it? So what will happen? Can I say the impurities will go to the next zone? Why? Because this particular thing is going to come out in the fused form. You are going to strongly heat it. So that particular zone alone is going to melt. And obviously, if the zone is going to melt, the impurities cannot come along with it because they are not soluble there. So what will they do? The impurities will go to the next zone. Right? Now you have the heater here. Now what will happen? This zone will be heated. Again, this will be the fused form. The impurities will shift to the next zone. Right? So after that, this zone is heated, the next zone. So at last, if you go to the last zone, this will have only impurities. This will have only impurities. And that will be cut off. Done. So whatever the thing which you have got till now, those are the pure metal. Hope you understand what is happening here. It's the only basic principle is the impurities are more soluble in the solid state of the metal than in the liquid state. That's what you need to understand. So when you heat, make it into a liquid, the impurities will shift to the next zone where the metal is in solid state. And there you heat, next zone. There you heat, next zone. So eventually there will be a last part which will have only your gang particles. Okay, right? So that is about zone refining. The last type of zone refining. What is the time? Okay, 10 more minutes. right? The last one is what is my electrolytic refining. Okay, right. So in electrolytic refining, we'll see what we're going to do. Okay, so I will have the electrolyte. For example, you are going for electrolytic refining of copper, assuming, right? So this particular solution has to be in accordingly. Say this is copper sulfate solution, electrolyte. Okay, now you are going to use cathode and anode, right? So you are going to use, this is my, say, cathode, turn to the negative terminal of the battery. And this is my cathode. This is my anode, which is kind of the positive terminal of the battery. Okay, now the question is, what are we going to use as anode? What are we going to use as cathode is the question here. Okay, now please understand the anode used here is the impure copper bar. Basically, the copper, the impure copper which you have, that is going to be used as the anode. Okay, and here you are going to use a pure copper bar. Remember this. Or if you just remember, I'm going to tell you how it works, and if you understand that, you don't have to remember this also. You can easily think and tell, okay, anode means impure copper, cathode means pure copper. Remember, in any electrolytic deposition process, in the cathode is always the metal gets deposited, isn't it? Right? You will see always, not only in this, anything, because cathode is negatively charged, the metals are positively charged, so they will go gain electrons and get reduced in the cathode. Okay, right. So anyways, we'll see what is going to happen here. Right. So what will happen is at okay, at cathode, we'll see what is going to happen. Okay, right. At cathode, what is going to happen? Now you have the impure copper. You know, impure copper means copper along with the impurities is what is there in the anode. Right. Now from the anode, the Cu2 plus ions, right? From the anode, this is also copper, right? From the anode, the Cu2 plus ions, which are obviously right, you will have copper plus the impurities. From that, only copper can form copper 2 plus. Correct. So this copper 2 plus will go to the cathode, and this cathode is going to donate 2 electrons, and you are going to form pure copper. You're going to form pure copper. So what will happen at the end of the reaction? You will see this would have gotten bigger, and this would have gotten shrunken. This would have gotten smaller. Is it not? Because you are depositing more and more amount of copper to the cathode side. So you will see the block of impure copper which you have used would have become bigger, right? And the impure copper side, the anode side, would have gotten shrunken because you use more and more amount of copper from there, and it got deposited here, right? And if you ask me, sir, what is happening at the anode? Anode is pretty simple, right? So anode, you have this anion which will go and get deposited there. So sulfur and oxygen can be coming out, but doesn't matter. This is what is important to us. Okay, so the Cu2 plus coming from the impure anode is going to get deposited on the cathode side by accepting 2 electrons. Okay, so that is what is called as your electrolytic refining. You can use it for copper, you can use it for even sometimes iron, you can use it. Okay, right. Now I just have to teach you about one thing, and that is about your blast furnace. Like that I have to teach you. I hope I have 5 more minutes. Yeah, I have. Right. Okay. So I hope you have taken it down.
Sir?
Yeah.
So I have to go to school in like 20 minutes. So shall I leave now?
Or else everybody has school today, or only you?
Like I have practical sessions today.
Yeah, you can leave.
Thank you, sir.
You can leave. Yeah, no issues. Right. So I'm just going to take 5 more minutes. I'm not going to take much of your time. Don't worry. Okay. So the last part is about this blast furnace, but I need to have the proper reactions. Steven. I need to know what are the zones of combustion, zones of that, zones of this. Okay, fine. Maybe we'll not see blast furnace now. Maybe in the evening class, I'll teach you what is blast furnace. Okay, now we'll see just one more thing, right? So we are going to see thermodynamics of metallurgy, like how thermodynamics will be used in metallurgy, right? So under that, I have an important thing called as an Ellingham diagram. Right now, Ellingham diagram is basically a plot between your delta G of formation of oxides versus temperature. Okay, right? We don't have to go into so much details about this, right? So you are going to plot the formation of oxides, you know, delta H of enthalpy of formation, something like that. You have Gibbs free energy of formation of the oxide, especially for oxides. Okay, and that is plotted in with respect to the temperature in the x-axis. Okay, now what this Ellingham diagram is used for is for deciding which metal. So we were talking about highly electropositive metals can reduce the metal oxide. For example, sodium with magnesium oxide will form sodium oxide, something like that, displacement reaction, right? So we have to decide which element, which metal to use to reduce a metal oxide, say I'll call it as M-O, right? Which metal to use to reduce the metal oxide, whatever the metal oxide we have at a particular temperature. This is what is more important, right? So Ellingham diagrams are used for deciding which metal to use as a reducing agent to reduce the metal oxide at a particular temperature. That's what you need to understand. Okay, right. Now, very simple. I'm just going to complete this in one statement. Okay, say you have two lines, right? Say this is for A plus O2 giving AO2, and this line is for B plus O2 giving BO2. Okay, right? Both are formation of oxide. Everything is for formation of oxide. Okay, now you see these two lines are going to meet at a particular temperature T1. Right? These two lines will meet at a particular temperature T1. Now only one statement. Just remember this. Right? The oxide of the upper line is reduced by the metal of the lower line. This statement alone you understand. Okay, you have the what it says is oxide of the upper line, whichever is the upper line oxide, right? That can be reduced by the metal of the lower line. So what I'm trying to tell you is, if you look at this particular temperature until this point, you see AO2 is in the upper line and BO2 is in the lower line, upper line, lower line. But again, after the T1, it changes. B goes to the top and A comes to the bottom, right? So what I'm trying to say is temperature lesser than T1, this reaction is possible in the sense that B plus AO2 will form BO2 plus A. This is possible. What I'm trying to tell you, see, oxide of the upper line. What is the oxide of the upper line? AO2. What is the can be reduced by the metal of the lower line. The lower line is for BO2. The metal of the lower line is B. So now this can replace A to form BO2 and A. Okay, the oxide of the upper line is reduced by the metal of the lower line. Here the metal of the lower line is B, oxide of the upper line is AO2. Right? Now, if at all I go for temperature which is greater than T1, the exact opposite reaction is possible. Temperature greater than T1, you will have BO2 reacting with A to form AO2 plus B. Now what do you see? Now this is the B, that is the oxide of the upper line. This is BO2, and this is the lower line, which will be A. So in this case, A can act as reducing agent to reduce BO2 to form B. Okay, now this is very simple, guys. If you just remember, it's all about spontaneity, right? So at a particular temperature, the whole delta G of this reaction is less than 0, and at a temperature greater than T1, for this reaction, delta G is less than 0. That means spontaneous. Now, how will you find it out? Very simple. At a particular temperature T1, you have both these reactions. A plus O2 giving AO2 will have delta G1. B plus O2 giving BO2 will have delta G2, right? Now, if you just reverse one of the reaction, and you add these two, right? So again, you will get a delta G value for either this reaction or this reaction, right? So now whichever reaction is going to have a delta G value is lesser than 0 at that particular temperature, only that reaction will happen. Again, I repeat, you have first reaction, second reaction, delta G1, delta G2, do something to this reaction, you get the third reaction. And if that reaction has delta G to be less than 0, that reaction will happen. That is what is the entire plot meaning to you. And that is a shortcut you remember. Instead of calculating and checking, if you just remember this, oxide of the upper line is reduced to the metal of the lower line, you are set. Okay, right? So we'll stop with this for today, not today. For this class, evening we'll meet. So only thing I have to teach you is a blast furnace. So we'll just see what all the reactions. Will just take 2-3 minutes. I'll just complete it in the evening class, 5 o'clock, and then we'll go for solid state. What type of questions will come from metallurgy, sir? Only theoretical questions, Karna. Right? Only theoretical questions. Right? Whatever I taught you, you just make note of it, and then you read your NCERT. Is more than sufficient. Okay, right? Fine. Thank you, guys. We'll meet again at 5 o'clock. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.